Good day, everybody. My name is Sarah Skerik, and I'm the head of marketing at Engagement Multiplier, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today, Stefan Wissenbach, our founder and CEO, are going to be discussing the era of belonging and releasing our new white paper with the same title. Stefan, if you can join us.
Was my cue.
Yes, there we
go.
are. The man of the hour. We've been talking about the era of belonging for a while, and we have a lot of information to share with you today. But before we dive in, I'm going to go through just a couple housekeeping tips. First and foremost, we absolutely encourage your questions. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat box. Please go ahead and submit your questions there. Additionally, we are going to be covering a lot of ground. You don't need to take copious notes because first and foremost, we will be sharing the white paper with you toward the end of the webinar, so you'll get the content in your hands. And secondly, after the webinar, we will be sending you a recorded copy as well. So sit back and relax and enjoy the download. All right, without further ado, Stefan, I think we can go ahead and get going.
Great.
So I'm just going to stop the presentation here so we can see our faces. So as I mentioned, this has been something that has been in the works for a while. Stefan, you started talking about an era of belonging last year as we were working up the culture crisis white paper, and we were thinking long and hard about all the impacts to culture that the last year has provided. And at the same time, if I'm recalling correctly, we were starting to see a lot of research that was digging into the impact on people. And so I think that a good place to start, you identified the sense of belonging as something that leaders needed to start thinking about as a new trend in employee engagement. Tell us what belonging means in the context of the workplace.
Great. Well, before I answer about the workplace, and something we'll cover today, first and foremost, belonging is a feeling. And when you feel accepted, supported, and secure, in particular as a member of a group, as in a business, that's belonging. And in the context of the workplace, the way I like to think of it is as the emotional response a person has to the work environment. So, do they feel comfortable being themselves? Do they feel secure? And do they believe, as we know and we'll talk about later, I suspect, because purpose comes up yet again, do they believe in the organization's purpose, and do they feel part of something bigger? So for me, that's what it means in the context of the workplace. But as I said at the beginning, it's first and foremost, it's a feeling, which is important.
So that's a really interesting way to start this discussion. Why do you think belonging is important now? We know that the pandemic has affected people's individuals, and we're learning more on the impact of people each day. But why is belonging in particular so important right now?
It's always been important, not just right now. So if you think back, as humans, we are tribal, and we depend on each other for survival. So we've always wanted, and we have a sort of an innate need to belong to a community or a part of something. And actually taking that a step further, if you think about it, one of the worst forms of punishment, particularly in centuries way gone, was to banish someone. Banished to Siberia is a phrase we use a lot here, and so that's that was because that was taking away that really important human need to feel belonging. And here we are. So, why is it important now? Well, it's always been important, but we are now coming out of what for many people will be one of the most challenging periods of their lives, taking personal, losses and grief and things like that to one side. But if you think about day-to-day living, it's not been a war, but it's been a very, very challenging period. And so what it's done is the last 12 plus months have, I think, really highlighted the need for us as humans to belong to something. As we've sat working from home, we haven't been able to go out, we haven't been able to socialize as much, and we haven't been able to interact with our work colleagues in the same way that we did before the pandemic. So that's why now, we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But and I think we may have a slide. We were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs earlier. Right, okay, so if we could just put that up, because that's attendees today, and sorry, I should have said welcome. I was struggling to get my video working, but welcome. And yes, you'll see in the middle of this that we have right bang in the middle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the foundation on which the other needs are built is love and belonging. So yeah, it's always been important, but it's even more important right now because of the conditions that we've experienced.
Well, and if I can make an ad hoc addition, literally just this morning, as I was perusing my daily take of news, I saw a study about friendship at work. And across the board, more than 80% of our new friendships, more than 80% of our friendships with people from different backgrounds, more than 80% of friendships between generations occur at work. Work is the catalyst for that. And so when you think about friendship and work and belonging, all of a sudden that gets pretty significant in a hurry. So I also think this is a good time to share some of the other data points that we found as we were developing the white paper. I didn't realize or appreciate the power of belonging, but until we started doing this work. However, I have now concluded that it is absolutely a superpower. And some of the stats I'm going to call out, high belonging in a workplace has been linked to a 56% increase in job performance, a 50% reduction in turnover risk, a 75% reduction in sick days taken. And so if those aren't bottom line drivers, I don't know what is. Relatedly, McKinsey released a study late last year that showed that belonging is highly correlated with our old friend employee engagement. And anyone who knows us knows that we're obviously fans of that and have a litany of data on the power of employee engagement to produce not just better results along the same lines as I just detailed above, but across other elements of the business as well. And what is super interesting is that among employees who say they feel they don't belong, only 20% said they were engaged. However, when you look at the group of employees who said they feel as though belong, that number jumps to 91%. So there is a clear correlation between belonging and employee engagement and the benefits thereof. I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. Again, superpower. So I think that as we dive into this, it's important to kind of break down the elements of belonging. What contributes to a sense of belonging amongst people? And the one that kept coming up in the research we did was the concept of psychological safety. So let's unpack that a bit.
Simply put, a safe space. It's when people feel psychologically safe, they can ask questions or give their opinions without fear. Something we're passionate about at Engagement Multiplier with our confidential anonymous feedback tools. We want people to be able to ask questions or give opinions without fear. And when people feel psychologically safe, then they are in a safe space where they feel they can give opinions or ask questions without fear. And that's when you get the best out of people. It's, I know that I've been involved in a number of brainstorming sessions with creative folks over the years, and this sort of phrase, there's no such thing as a bad idea, say what's on your mind. And what they're trying to do is create an environment where you feel safe, because if you feel safe, something that might not be absolutely spot on would spark off something else for someone else. You get all this benefit. So and when people feel psychologically safe and they can be vulnerable with each other, that's when, and I know that many, in fact, pretty much everyone watching this webinar, I'm sure, can think back to a time when this would have been relevant for them. But when you're having when you feel safe and you're having an interaction with someone where there's some vulnerability, that's what builds personal connections. That's absolutely what builds personal connections. And if you think back to times when that might have happened with you, the chances are good that the way that you trusted each other with some personal information meant that you were perhaps a little bit more vulnerable, but that's what created that connection. So, and I think sort of taking psychological safety through to that personal connection, and then personal connection, then and feeling vulnerable, you end up with trust, and people trust each other. And I know that through the pandemic, I'm proud to have a team where we do absolutely trust each other, and we have that personal connection. And the fact that we've all been, working in our own little bubbles in isolation, we've managed to maintain that trust and that communication, which has meant that the business has continued to function fabulously well. Right.
And despite the fact that some of us have not met each other in person yet.
I know. I mean, you joined. It's funny. I mean, for everyone here today, Sarah was due to start about a couple of weeks after lockdown, the first lockdown started, and she was having a break after her last role, big relax before getting ready. And I rang her. I said, "We need you to start a month early. Is that okay? Because the world's falling apart and we want to." But Sarah and I have never met in person. I'm sure we've all hired people now that have that we've not met, but it's going to be interesting to meet.
Yeah, it will. I hope I like you as much in person as I do on Zoom. But I think that you're calling out trust is particularly important, because trust is something that organizations are psychological safety. There are some other contributors. And Stefan, can you walk us through some of those that you think are most important?
Yeah, I'm sure we have these as a slide.
Yep, bringing it up.
If someone could share, that'd be great. So yeah, there they are. Company cares about your well-being. You can trust your manager, supported by your manager and colleagues, etc. I'm not going to read them all. You can probably all read faster than I can speak. But as I mentioned at the beginning, belonging is a feeling, and so the imperative right now is for leaders to create an environment in which people actually feel they belong. I know this is a statement of the obvious. And that's an environment where, as to some of the points on this slide, it's where people feel valued, they feel they can trust their manager, they feel supported, that they feel heard. And it's, I know we hear a lot about culture, have for years, and because it's very important. This is the difference between telling people that your company has an inclusive culture versus having a culture in which people actually truly feel included. And we've been spending a lot of time with many companies over the last few months, helping them to understand whether their belief that they have an inclusive culture is actually the reality, the perception, their perception and the reality are the same, because their employees do actually truly feel included. And I have to tell you that in the majority of cases, the expectation about how much employees actually truly feel they belong versus the reality is way off. The good news is it's fixable very fast, but we'll talk about the truth later. But I think that's just an important point to make.
Well, I think that is an important point to make, because one thing that we not just found, but are continuing to find, it seems like almost daily, there's a new report that is describing the degree to which an organization or its leaders are out of touch, completely disconnected with how employees feel. This is not an incident, it's a trend. And so the question I have for you, Stefan, is, do you believe that executives really understand how their people are feeling despite these news reports we're seeing?
Absolutely not. And I apologize if I've offended anyone on this call who thinks that they do. Overwhelmingly, there's two reasons really. Firstly, just the amount of you just mentioned it, the amount of reporting. I know you've referenced a lot of this in the white paper.
Mm-hmm.
The IBM, I think it was called Closing the Chasm. That was a fascinating piece about how just so far off the mark executives often are.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a gulf between executives and leaders' perceptions and employees at the moment. And the second reason for me feeling the way I do is based on hard evidence of working now with, many companies over the last, through the pandemic, and in particular recently, as we've really sort of started to work on this very earnestly, realizing how massive it is and how easy it is to solve. We're just seeing the feedback coming back from team members, providing some surprises to even and to some incredible companies who, they're the sort of businesses that you expect to see written about in the press because of how they handled the pandemic and the great things they did and how they looked after their teams. But still, unfortunately, there's a bit of a disconnect. Said earlier, the great thing about this is that it's actually easy to resolve, but you do need to sort of know it's there. And that's really fundamentally why we created the white paper, wasn't it? Was because this is such a biggie, and we just wanted everyone that wasn't really aware of it to be aware of it and have the opportunity to do something about it.
I'm going to share some stats that are related to this. And I think there's two sides to this coin. So number one, leaders are not accurately gauging how their employees feel about things like morale, whether they're overworked, to a significant degree, both leaders as well as the heads of HR, who have been unbelievably busy over the last year and probably have not had time to do the assessments they would normally do, are misjudging the degree to which their employees are saying, that they're burnt out or that morale is low. The leaders think everything is fine, the performance is good, but on the back end, Stefan, I think you've said it well in the past. People are fragile, people are exhausted, and that's showing up in the numbers when you talk to the employees directly. The other side of the coin is related to the Closing the Chasm observation from IBM, which stated that leaders also underestimate how effective the programs they put in place for their employees actually are, by a degree of like 80-some%. So they'll say, yes, we're doing a good job of looking after people's mental health or wellness. And however, when you poll the employees who are the recipients of the program, the numbers are far off. And so this is something where even I think that it's important, even for organizations, and this is to the point Stefan you made of the organizations that anyone would look at on paper and say they've done an excellent job of supporting employees through the pandemic. It's still worth their while to check in with employees and really find out, okay, did this work for you? How is this going? Otherwise, it's just a waste of time and energy and investment, isn't it? If it's just ticking a box versus generating a result. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, to add to that, and I'm just conscious actually as we're talking here, I'm just thinking about the attendees today. The problems that we're talking about, I think I'm not sick and tired of hearing. I don't want to be dismissive of them, but this is not new news that employees are fragile, that there are potentially issues, that it's been hard navigating the pandemic, and we know that mental health's on a rise. And I want to be careful about people attending this webinar feeling, I've heard this before. I know that some of the facts are the same, but what is very different here is this simplicity of this solution and it being around belonging. And we talk about leaders being disconnected from, unfortunately, from, and that's painful as a leader. We just did an exercise, in my own business where I've got an amazing team that I feel really close to. And I found that in my business, and we're pretty good at what we do, that I was off the mark in a number of areas. And if I hadn't have taken the time to check, verify, I wouldn't have known. And we're acting now, and we're doing some great things that get everything where they need to be. But I do worry that there are going to be a number of leaders that dismiss this as woo-woo, press on, and I feel that it's a slippery slope because they're going to find that things that they're doing as we move forward aren't going to work as effectively. And what's also going to happen is, and there was some, you probably know the statistic. I think something like 50% of people at the moment looking for or considering looking for new jobs, and that's in any business that's going to be chaos. That's going to be so painful, and so you need to get ahead of that and actually getting into a position where you can't ignore this. So, but I think there will be businesses that do. And the great thing about the world we live in right now is we're all very connected from a technology perspective. The problem with that is that your employees will be aware of what's going on elsewhere in companies their friends work for. And my son's home with his girlfriend, and she just started work at a new company that's working really hard to create a sense of belonging. And it was lovely over the dinner table last night hearing her talking about it. But she's also talking to all of her friends about it. And they're saying to her, oh, well, we started work somewhere. They're not doing that. And this is a mobile workforce that's going to move. So,
well, and I'm reminded of one of my favorite sayings of yours, which is ignorance is never a strategy. And this is absolutely one of those times when it seems that leaders should be particularly conscious of the fact that they have their own assumptions and they have their own biases, and it's absolutely a good idea to set those aside, not act upon them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else to add to this?
I don't think so. I think
we covered it.
Yeah, ignoring it.
Okay, so you've talked about the fact that your daughter's employer is actually taking steps to consciously build belonging among its employees. We building belonging within their organization in a moment like this.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm particularly proud of what we do here at Engagement Multiplier is create simple structures and frameworks to help organizations tackle these particular challenges and emerge stronger. And the approach that we've been sharing, as you know, Sarah, with our clients, we're calling it AURA, A-U-R-A, and it's just shorthand for, first of all, acceptance, then understanding, then responding and acting. So if we sort of take those in turn, acceptance, and I appreciate there may be some resistance from certain leaders, if I'm talking to each of you that's on this webinar, within your own organizations, there are going to be certain leaders who are going to be resistant to this. We found that with some of the fabulous companies we work with that have gone through this exercise, there's often one or two, and sometimes more in the bigger organizations, leaders that are a little bit resistant to accepting the fact that things might not be exactly as they perceive them to be. So I think the first thing is accepting that we all have certain biases and assumptions, and we just need to set those aside, first of all, and accept the fact that there may be different perceptions amongst employees. And I remember someone saying to me, one of my early mentors said to me, Stefan, perception is reality, and it's stuck with me. It's so true, and their perception is their reality, and I'll come back to that in a moment, because then what you need to do is understand. So understand their truth. So spend time, and we've created tools and capabilities which clients that are on this webinar can obviously use very easily. Just speak to your engagement manager, but also prospective clients can use entirely for free. We're not selling our platform here. We're looking to give you capabilities, and normally when people see the value, then we get to spend more time with you, which is good. Everyone wins. So the second thing is to understand the truth. So actually spend some time, and we talked earlier on about confidentially and anonymously getting data that where people feel they don't need to feel vulnerable because they're safe. They can actually share there, and then with that wonderful feedback, as I said earlier, I had some wonderful feedback for my organization. You then get the chance to next thing is to look at that and act, or respond and then act. So you acknowledge what the feedback is, and respond to the team about what you're going to do, and then follow through. So, acceptance, understanding, responding, and then acting is, and it's very simple, actually. It doesn't actually take a lot of time. It just takes, it takes a willingness to, an acceptance of vulnerability, when asking, finding out that your perception is not matched by everybody's else sometimes can be, I'm surprised. Being the Kaizen that I've spoken about many times, you sort of layer up lots of little changes that are quite easy to implement, and we all want easy right now. I think after the last year, we want easy stuff, and it is easy. I have not yet seen responses to an exercise on belonging for any of our clients where the feedback has had the leadership in shock about, we can't possibly do that. It's too complicated, or it's too much work. It's normally it's always really easy stuff.
Yep. Well, and the other thing too that I think is really important here, you've often talked about when you are given feedback as a leader, you have two opportunities. You can either correct a misperception or correct a problem. You have a more elegant way of putting it. Tweak a challenge? What's your phrasing?
No, you were almost spot on. So it's basically the two things are, you either when you get feedback, there's either there's two opportunities, one of only two opportunities. Either an opportunity to correct a misunderstanding. So that employee, in fact, and thank you for saying that, because this perception is reality thing again. Okay, so somebody's perception is a certain way. There's a phenomenal hotel we deal with that's got about 450 employees. It's in North Carolina. The GM there is the epitome of an engaged leader. He's incredible. And they did an assessment recently, and a number of employees' perceptions was that there wasn't enough money being reinvested back into the business. And this is after they'd just done and were then about to do another $20 million investment program in making property better. So that was the employee's reality, okay? That you don't invest enough in this business. So the opportunity that they had was to correct the misunderstanding by just sharing, well, thank you. I'm sorry you feel that way. I thought you might like to know that. And poof, it's gone. Problem's gone. Oh, wow, they're investing that much. They are investing in the business. Problem solved. And then other times, and actually this is less than it's often being able to correct a misunderstanding is the greater volume. And that's because organizations, no matter how brilliant we think we are at communicating, we're not as good as we think we are. And then you've got you've actually got the genuine opportunities where there are genuine issues. And of course, you're not going to be able to solve all those at once. But being able to communicate with your team openly that you agree and you know about them and they are to be addressed, but these other things are a priority right now, but thank you. It's great. It creates good energy and employees love it.
Well, and what I like so much about the Aura approach is it does some of the work for an organization. So if an organization is operating in an environment where they don't have that trust, they don't have that transparency, they don't have that sense of belonging, and a leader sitting manager and doesn't feel as though they can speak up in a meeting without retribution, we create that safe space for them. And then the structure that you have created also will just lead a team through the sort of communications and responses that, as part of the process, create trust and transparency. And so just these first steps lay that foundation for belonging that's so important. I don't mean to whinge on about this, but I think this is an important point.
Is it on your question list to talk about the structure that we've created in terms of making it easy at the front end? Because as we're talking about asking, acceptance and then understanding. So the difference between acceptance and understanding is that you need to go out and ask employees how they feel. And I'm just sensing that for most people watching is like, whoa, that's a big thing. We're not just going to ask everyone how they feel, because what are we going to get back? Are we going to touch on the structure for that or today or
No, I don't think we're planning on that today, but what we can do, I'll make a note of in the follow-up, we will share the webinar we did a few weeks ago on the People Charter, which really does talk about how to build a fence around the questions that you ask. So you're asking the right sort of questions that engender valuable and manageable responses rather than inciting chaos.
Really important. So if anyone didn't, and perhaps we could put the link to that webinar in the follow-up, because if anyone didn't see that, I can see people at the moment, well, I can't see anyone, but I can imagine that people are thinking, whoa, if I go, so yes, the answer is it's easy. There's a simple structure.
Right.
You can ask a few very straightforward questions that will give you what you need and not open the floodgates to create, an unmanageable amount of work.
We'll definitely share that in the follow-up. So there's another element here that I think that popped out to me, and it's one of your favorite topics, but as I was doing the research for the paper, and that is the power of your old friend purpose, specifically with respect to belonging. I know, look at that smile. He's like, I love talking about purpose. But to put the hard data behind it, again, this is one of those things that on the face of it can sound woo-woo, but the fact of the matter is the data makes clear that there are material benefits to be had. Bain did some research toward the end of the pandemic and found that among employees whose satisfaction with the company increased through the pandemic, 86% said that their employer has a purpose that his people are passionate about and that they find meaning between purpose, values, and belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone here today, this has been one of my biggest breakthroughs for some time. I think back to many years ago when we came up with a way of back then engagement, was perceived as woo-woo, and we came up with a way of measuring it really effectively, and then providing a structure and framework so organizations could take simple actions that then resulted in tangible improvements. And out of that, don't waste a good pandemic, right? So we've had a pandemic, and it's actually thrown out some real nuggets of gold. And one for us has been, and for me has been, how you can tie together. And I know that we have this slide ready to share when I'm ready, but if you could pull up the what, why, and how slide, I think that would be really helpful now, because I think this makes the point really clearly, and that is that for me, for anyone that's heard me speak about it before, and anyone that's familiar with the power of purpose, you'll know that a purpose is what gives your employees a why. Okay, it's a why for showing up. Before the pandemic, it was a why. During the pandemic, organizations that didn't even have a purpose found themselves with a purpose, which was the COVID trap. And that was their employees uniting around, the fact that there was this, it gave us a short-term temporary purpose, shoulder together, we're going to get through this. As that falls away, you need to have a purpose that's more than a temporary purpose of the pandemic. And so what it does is that unites, a purpose unites teams. Okay, it provides, as it says on the slide, energy and focus. Then let's talk about the what. And I'm sure so many of you have done got a business where you have clearly defined values. Really important. We have a phrase in our business: I face every day with our values in mind. I face stands for our values, which are impact, fun, authenticity, caring, and enthusiasm. And we use those values as a way to performance reviews. I've got quarterly appraisals, strategy meetings, everything. It's just a fundamentally sound way to be running your business. So our values are what we stand for. And whilst we want a diverse set of, and we all want, you want in your business, I want in mine, I want a diverse set of perspectives, because that's healthy, but I want a shared set of beliefs. And these are our beliefs, our what. And then the how is, and this is how it all fits together so beautifully. The how is, how do we want our people to feel? And if you look at the why and the what and sort of think about this, the how is the emotional response to our ability as leaders to create the environment that demonstrates the purpose and the values.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do that, then our employees will feel good. We know that already, that purpose-driven companies, there's been for the last God knows how many years, loads of articles on how purpose-driven companies triumph. I think it's gone up a level, because I think belonging and purpose now sit very much side by side, and are interlinked. But yeah, does that answer your question, Sarah? Or
that does, yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm not just saying that. Okay, so you mentioned at the outset that belonging has always been important. And as somebody who has, there's more water under my dam than I care to admit. I've been, leading teams for decades. But even, as I said, this was kind of a profound experience for me. I really just did not think of belonging in the way that I do now. You've been calling this the era of belonging. And that's a big statement, Stefan. Do you really, is this really an era? Or are you just lending emphasis to the fact that, like, hey guys, pay attention to this now. This is really important.
Well, actually, I had a very strong suspicion this was going to be a question, because I know it was because of our conversation with Todd the other day. Todd, for everyone attending, has been involved with me in the business since day one. He's our CSO in Chicago, and takes care of our product. And he's a brilliant entrepreneur. And he challenged me on this, and I know Sarah was on the Zoom, and because yes, it can sound a little bit grandiose, right? But yes, it's always been around. I think back to, and I'm an avid reader of articles and case studies on successful companies, and I'm a member of a number of entrepreneurial groups. And if I think of business, I think of groups like Vistage or EO or Strategic Coach and others. You have within those communities, in the main, entrepreneurs, business leaders that understand this and have done for years. So it's not new. So I'm not claiming that this is a new thing. The reason I'm calling it an era is that I just think we've got to the point now where it cannot be avoided anymore. And in the past, some businesses have managed to get by without it. I don't think you can now. I think it will be very hard to. And so for me, that makes it an era, because the organizations that don't do this will struggle, and some will die. And those that do it will continue to trade and thrive. And so does that make it an era? I think because it's so widespread and technology is everywhere, I think it does. And it's not because I'm being grandiose. I genuinely think this is now something that's so fundamentally important that every business leader needs to pay attention to it.
I think another aspect is simply the fact that employee expectations have changed. Completely. And just as societal acceptances and expectations change over time, so do what employees expect of their employers. And whereas 50 years ago, you just showed up.
How lonely employees felt before the pandemic, and it's not
61% of American employees surveyed in 2019 said they were lonely.
Yeah, and that was before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, things are not better.
So there we go. I mean, what else do we need to say?
All right. So there's an opportunity here. It sounds like that belonging, or should I say, rather, a lack of belonging within an organization really poses serious issues. Really kind of the big one being the potential to lose quite a few people, as the job market is already getting pretty tight over here. So this is a big black cloud on the horizon. Are there any silver linings? Weird question.
It is a black cloud, but I think there is a silver lining. if we're objective and honest and we look back to sort of the world pre-pandemic, I think there were a lot of organizations that had it reasonably easy for quite some time. They'd functioned quite well. You know, they had good leadership, or they have good leadership, and things have been sort of ticking along. You know, trade is good, business is profitable, and for me, the silver lining is that businesses that got away in the past with things because things were different won't anymore. And that might sound like a bit of a perverse way of putting it, but the silver lining is that you don't have a choice, and there's no incentive like no alternative. I don't believe right now you have an alternative. I don't think you can ignore this. And the great thing about that, because it's so simple and easy to take action on this, what we're going to see, and this is the silver lining, we're going to see hundreds, thousands of companies start doing simple things around this that will create a greater sense of belonging in their organizations. Their productivity, profitability are going to improve. Their retention is going to improve. They're going to waste less money. And that for me is a silver lining, especially as it's so easy to do things, to take action. And so, and I'm not saying that from a self-serving perspective because of some of the solutions we've created. I genuinely, it's time for good news. I'm looking forward to hearing again about all the success stories of the companies that are doing well after the pandemic, not just because of the pandemic. And it's great to hear those that have managed to pivot and change and adapt. Wonderful. But just back to a period where there's genuinely great businesses being run and things are thriving. That's what we need.
All right, super. This just called to mind, and I should have flagged this earlier, but what you're really talking about is kind of like the good to great principle. Things are good right now for many organizations. They could be a lot better, and by taking these actions, they would be able to improve their performance.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those who are listening, when we rebooted the room, unfortunately, I lost all of the questions that you had submitted via chat. So I'm inviting you to resubmit your question, please. Additionally, I do have a few. I was able to grab a few, so I'm going to start working through those. But if I don't ask your question again, please send it. So the first one I have is it better to focus on belonging when we're back in the office?
No. I think there's a unique opportunity. It's a problem that exists right now, and it's exacerbated by not being in the office. And so, and I'm really looking forward to when our team can be together again. So I would say, do what we did. We took time to focus on it now whilst everyone's still working. They're doing things a bit differently in a post-pandemic world in terms of how they bring their teams together. Well, great to know what the teams would like. And by focusing on it now, you can find out.
Well, and I would just add to that the fact that, we are a transatlantic company with teams in the US and the UK. We have a lot of new joiners over the last year. And I believe we have a high sense of belonging, even though, as we indicated earlier, some of us have not even met in person, but it's really not what you say, but what you do. So here's a question from Joe. How do you deal with leaders who have a natural tendency to place judgment on employees who are different from them? That's a hot one.
That's a great question. In the context of this exercise that I talk about in terms of feelings and, thinking about how you would like to create a sense of belonging, thinking about how you'd like your employee. We ask leaders to think about how they would like their employees to feel, and get together and collaborate around that, and then have the employees score against those statements on how they actually feel. that sort of exercise, where you have perhaps one or two leaders in the room that are not necessarily, the same as the others, it sort of strips through the noise, because you're asking the question, you're agreeing on how you want employees to feel, you're going out anonymously, you're asking them, they're telling you, and you're getting to see whether you're on the mark or off the mark, whether there's an opportunity to correct a misunderstanding or a genuine improvement. When it comes to just generally, it's a bit of a leadership. Failings is perhaps a strong word, but it's certainly not a leadership quality, right? I'm trying to find the word. So if that was a leader in my organization, I think we'd, over a nice cup of coffee and a biscuit, we would have a conversation about, employees' perspectives and how valuable they are, and how, we can learn from people that have, I said it earlier, didn't I? We want people that have got a diverse set of perspectives, but a shared set of beliefs. It's not healthy to have everyone thinking the same all the time. So I think a nice cup of coffee and an arm around the shoulder and a conversation about that in a non-confrontational way would probably be a good thing.
So I'm reminded of a couple things. First and foremost is the leadership perception gap. And in fact, I've just written down, Joe, your name, and I'm going to arrange to have this sent to you. And in fact, I'll make sure that there's some links in the follow-up for everybody. But early on, I think maybe, it was last June or July, Stefan, you were ahead of this and realized that leaders were going to need a different set of skills to successfully lead into this wild new future. And really at the core of the leadership perception gap, what we're really talking about is ultimately somebody who's got a high EQ, a leader who about development, because there are some important skills that need to be picked up. So I'll ensure that we'll add that to the list to follow up as well. And let's see here, back to the questions that I was able to snag beforehand. How can I tell if my culture has a sense of belonging? What are the markers?
It's some of them are very obvious. It's the energy that you will see around. I arrived on a Zoom earlier. I was 3 minutes early. The rest of them were there, and I just waited because they were in the middle of a very energizing conversation with a lot of smiles and laughter. And it's simple things like that. You sort of see it happening in their behaviors.
Yep.
You see it in people's. And there's the obvious ones, like people don't leave and all the stuff that we said it fixes, but you see it in the way that we always know when we talk about an engaged employee, and it's someone that's present, focused, and energized, and someone that feels a strong sense of belonging is also often present, focused, and energized, and they will go out of their way to do a job well or complete a project well. I think you feel it. It's like you feel it, and that's one of the problems with it for a lot of leaders, is that it feels a bit sort of intangible and woo-woo, which is why, as we said just now, you sort of create the statements and then get a score against them, because that makes it much more tangible. But no, I think you feel it and you see it very, very quickly. And you don't have to be a high EQ leader to notice it. Would you want to add anything to that, Sarah?
I would say that I would say that some of the on-demand surveys that we've created recently, especially the culture crisis survey, get to a lot of the components of belonging. And I will see that we share the slide deck as well. And I know that we've had some issues with the technology. You will all be getting the recording. I will send the slides to you so you can pull out the elements of belonging. I think that this is a great question, and I would just start by asking people how they feel. Do you feel you can share your opinion freely? Do you feel you can trust your manager? Do you feel, start asking those things, because those are the markers. Those are the basic markers. You can see it in their energy, as you said, but I think also there's coming to ask. We have, but are there any other tips or suggestions to avoid the them and us in office versus remote?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to the extent that it's practical and possible, I would, and I'm seeing this happening. We're doing it here, and we've got. I mean, I feel that all of our colleagues in Chicago work remotely because I don't see them in the office, right? But we do have a number of meetings together. One of the things that we might want to push is that epic meeting strategy, so that when you're having meetings, they via Zoom. That you can create that energy, purpose, and connection. I think that where possible and practical, periodically having some in-person contact, and it's funny because it's been over 2 years now since the Chicago team got together with the UK team. So we're both working in, and so that's something that we will do again as soon as it's practically possible. Get everyone together. We're not a huge organization, and so have some good quality time over a long weekend together. That works. And then it's about creating meetings that are focused around that sense, rather than just getting work done. You can be doing brainstorms, collaborations, or even fun stuff. I mean, we've had cocktail making Zooms, we've had meals together, and been able to do things using technology that help bring everyone together. And then I think the answer is in your question. Be really focused on not making it them and us. So it becomes part of your, as you're going through your working weeks, how do we make sure that we don't create a them and us scenario? Make it one of your values that, that everyone, you've got inclusivity and everyone feels a part of the same company, and encourage employees to do that. Have a coffee Zoom with someone that works remotely, or create that connection, and make sure that they are as connected to the conversations around strategy, direction, innovation. Everyone's connected exactly the same. Very important.
I would also say don't overlook the power of routine short daily meetings to check in with each other. Some of the old hands who've been here longer than me have mentioned that we've actually become more connected as a team during the pandemic than they can ever recall being, simply because you had the foresight to suggest at the outset, hey, here's a structure for daily really important information exchange. So like, I have never had a better grasp of what's going on in a company than I have working here, because we talk about it on a daily basis. And then we would close out our days together as well, by simply just sharing what we did, what popped up, and that really worked. And I think that to avoid the us versus them scenario, creating those moments so the people who are working from home are not starting their day in isolation, who are not just starting their day alone, and then are performing their day alone, but in fact are interacting with others, is important. I'm just going to whiz through here because we are pretty much at time, and I think I've got to all of the questions. Yeah, Stefan, we did it. Once again, guys, I apologize for the technical issues. You will be receiving within the next day or so a link to the recording. We also have a special offer for prospects. There we are. Thank you. And we will also be sharing the slide deck as well, along with a number of the other items that we shared. So watch your email. You're going to be getting a load of follow-up from us. Everyone, thank you for your time today, Stefan. It was a lot of fun as always. Thank you as well.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Take care.